Hello and welcome back to another Torah Tuesday. Today we're in Exodus chapter 3, and I want to talk to you about the puzzling fact that the mountain where the Israelites come after they leave Egypt is known by two different names. When Moses first arrives there in chapter 3, it's known as Horeb, the mountain of God, but later it's known as Mount Sinai. So why is this? Well, many scholars have suggested that this is evidence of two different literary sources that have later been combined, so that each tradition has its own name for this mountain, and somebody put these two traditions alongside each other in the biblical text. And while that's certainly possible that there were different traditions that were later combined, you might still wonder, why did the person who combined these two traditions not fix it so that they used the same name? And I would like to suggest that there is a literary reason for these two different titles describing this region. So before we talk about why, let me just give you an example. I teach at Prairie College, which is situated in the small town of Three Hills, Alberta, and somebody from out of town could say, I'm headed to Three Hills, or they could say, I'm headed to Prairie, and by saying that mean essentially the same thing. So there's two different words used to refer to the same journey, the same approximate destination. So some scholars think that Horeb is the name of the wider region, and Sinai is the name of the mountain that's in the midst of this region, where Moses meets Yahweh, and then the rest of the nation meets Yahweh later. In Exodus 17, verses 1 through 7, when the people are complaining about water, this is before they've arrived at Mount Sinai, they complain about not having water, and Yahweh provides water for them with Moses' help from a rock, and it's called the rock at Horeb. So that's one indication that Horeb may be a wider region than just this mountain. Only once in Exodus is the mountain referred to as Mount Horeb. And there may be a reason for that. In Exodus chapter 33, verse 6, it's called Mount Horeb, but it could be because it's a word play. The word Horeb sounds very much like the word cherev, which is the word for sword. And in that context, there has just been a bloody scene in which people were using swords. And so it could be a clever way to refer to the mountain as Mount Sword for the sake of wordplay. Now, what about the name Sinai? Sinai seems to be the most common name used for the mountain, and potentially the name of the mountain comes from this passage. In Exodus chapter 3, verses 2 and 3, Moses has arrived at Horeb, the mountain of God, and there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Now, this is not the normal word for bush or tree. The word used here is sneh. And it's a rare word used only in this scene and then later in Deuteronomy 33 when Moses in his blessing refers to Yahweh as the bush dweller, the sneh dweller. So it's quite possible that the name Sinai is a play on words with this bush that Moses sees burning, and that that the mountain gets its name from the bush. The word sneh sounds like the word for bronze and gleaming, so it may have been a good way to describe this bush that is crackling with fire and yet not burning up. Now in chapter 3, verse 12, Yahweh gives Moses a sign that he is who he says he is. He says, when you have left Egypt, you will worship God at this mountain. So it's quite important theologically for us to see that whatever we call this place, whether we call it Horeb or Sinai, that this is the same place to which Israel will come and meet God. I want to leave you with one last insight that I find really fascinating, and that is from Gerald Janzen, who in an article talked about the symbolic significance of the burning bush. He notes that on either side of this scene in which Moses meets God in the bush is a statement that God makes expressing his deep concern over Israel's suffering in Egypt and how he plans to redeem them, that he sees their suffering. And Janzen suggests, and he's not the first to do so, that the bush actually represents the nation of Israel. that, like the Israelites, it is burning up but not being consumed. Israel is in Egypt, enslaved. They're in the fires of affliction and suffering, and yet God is preserving them, and they will survive this experience. He will bring them out. So symbolically and theologically, right in the center, we have a glimpse of the way that God will care for his people. Some of you have complained to me that Torah Tuesday only comes once a week, and I know it's such a shame. In the meantime, did you know that you can take classes by distance at Prairie College? And I teach Torah twice a year, and because of the pandemic, I'm teaching simultaneously online and in the classroom. So if you're interested in studying the Torah with me, you can contact our admissions department and ask them for more information. Have a great week.